Section 5 of The Sword of Welleran and Other Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Kelvin D., Minneapolis. www.kelvind.com. The Sword of Welleran and Other Stories by Lord DUNSANY. The Highwayman. Tom of the Roads had ridden his last ride, and was now alone in the night. From where he was, a man might see the white recumbent sheep, and the black outline of the lonely downs, and the grey line of the farther and lonelier downs beyond them. Or in the hollows far below him, out of the pitiless wind, he might see the grey smoke of hamlets arising from black valleys. But all alike was black to the eyes of Tom, and all the sounds were silence in his ears. Only his soul struggled to slip from the iron chains and to pass southwards into paradise. And the wind blew and blew. For Tom tonight had naught but the wind to ride. They had taken his true black horse on the day when they took him from the green fields and the sky, men's voices and the laughter of women, and had left him alone with chains about his neck to swing in the wind forever. And the wind blew and blew. But the soul of Tom of the Roads was nipped by the cruel chains, and whenever it struggled to escape, it was beaten backwards into the iron collar by the wind that blows from paradise from the south. And swinging there by the neck, there fell away old sneers from off his lips, and scoffs that he had long since scoffed at God fell from his tongue, and there rotted old bad lusts out of his heart, and from his fingers the stains of deeds that were evil. And they all fell to the ground and grew there in pallid rings and clusters. And when these ill things had all fallen away, Tom's soul was clean again, as his early love had found it a long while since in spring, and it swung up there in the wind with the bones of Tom, and with his old torn coat and rusty chains. And the wind blew and blew. And ever and anon the souls of the sepultured, coming from consecrated acres, would go by beating up wind to paradise past the gallows tree and past the soul of Tom that might not go free. Night after night Tom watched the sheep upon the downs with empty hollow sockets, till his dead hair grew and covered his poor dead face and hid the shame of it from the sheep, and the wind blew and blew. Sometimes on gusts of the wind came someone's tears, and beat against the iron chains, but could not rust them through. And the wind blew and blew. And every evening all the thoughts that Tom had ever uttered came flocking in from doing their work in the world, the work that may not cease, and sat along the gallows branches and chirruped to the soul of Tom, the soul that might not go free. All the thoughts that he had ever uttered, and the evil thoughts rebuked the soul that bore them because they might not die, and all those that he had uttered the most furtively chirruped the loudest and the shrillest in the branches all the night. And all the thoughts that Tom had ever thought about himself now pointed at the wet bones and mocked at the old torn coat. But the thoughts that he had had of others were the only companions that his soul had to soothe it in the night, as it swung to and fro. And they twittered to the soul and cheered to the poor dumb thing that could have dreams no more, till there came a murderous thought and drove them all away. And the wind blew and blew. Paul, Archbishop of Alois and Vayence, lay in his white sepulchre of marble facing full to the southwards towards paradise, and over his tomb was sculptured the cross of Christ, that his soul might have repose. No wind howled here as it howled in the lonely tree-tops up upon the downs, but came with gentle breezes, orchard-scented, over the lowlands from paradise from the southwards, and played about forget-me-nots and grasses in the consecrated land, where lay the reposeful round the sepulchre of Paul, Archbishop of Alois and Vayence. Easy it was for a man's soul to pass from such a sepulchre, and flitting low over remembered fields, to come upon the garden lands of paradise, and find eternal ease. And the wind blew and blew. In a tavern of foul repute 3 men were lapping gin. Their names were Joe and Will and the gypsy Puglioni. None other names had they, for of whom their fathers were they had no knowledge, but only dark suspicions. Sin had caressed and stroked their faces often with its paws, but the face of Puglioni Sin had kissed all over the mouth and chin. Their food was robbery and their pastime murder. All of them had incurred the sorrow of God and the enmity of man. They sat at a table with a pack of cards before them, all greasy with the marks of cheating thumbs, and they whispered to one another over their gin, but so low that the landlord of the tavern and the other end of the room could hear only muffled oaths, and knew not by whom they swore or what they said. These 3 were the staunchest friends that ever God had given unto a man, and he to whom their friendship had been given had nothing else besides, saving some bones that swung in the wind and rain, and an old torn coat and iron chains, and a soul that might not go free. But as the night wore on, the 3 friends left their gin and stole away, and crept down to that graveyard where rested in his sepulchre Paul, Archbishop of Alois and Vayence. At the edge of the graveyard, but outside the consecrated ground, they dug a hasty grave, 2 digging while one watched in the wind and rain. And the worms that crept in the unhallowed ground wondered and waited. And the terrible hour of midnight came upon them with its fears, and found them still beside the place of tombs. And the 3 friends trembled at the horror of such an hour in such a place, and shivered in the wind and drenching rain, but still worked on. And the wind blew and blew. Soon they had finished, and at once they left the hungry grave with all its worms unfed, and went away over the wet fields, stealthily but in haste, leaving the place of tombs behind them in the midnight. And as they went they shivered, and each man as he shivered cursed the rain aloud. And so they came to the spot where they had hidden a ladder and a lantern. There they held long debate whether they should light the lantern, or whether they should go without it for fear of the king's men. But in the end it seemed to them better that they should have the light of their lantern, and risk being taken by the king's men and hanged, than that they should come suddenly face to face in the darkness, with whatever one might come face to face with a little after midnight about the gallows tree. On 3 roads in England, whereon it was not the wont of folk to go their ways in safety, travellers tonight went unmolested. But the 3 friends, walking several paces wide of the king's highway, approached the gallows tree, and Will carried the lantern, and Joe the ladder. But Puglioni carried a great sword wherewith to do the work which must be done. When they came close, they saw how bad was the case with Tom, for little remained of that fine figure of a man, and nothing at all of his great resolute spirit. Only as they came they thought they heard a whimpering cry like the sound of a thing that was caged and unfree. To and fro in the winds swung the bones and the soul of Tom, for the sins that he had sinned on the king's highway against the laws of the king. And with shadows and a lantern through the darkness, at the peril of their lives, came the 3 friends that his soul had won before it swung in chains. Thus the seeds of Tom's own soul that he had sown all his life had grown into a gallows tree that bore in season iron chains in clusters, while the careless seeds that he had strewn here and there, a kindly jest and a few merry words, had grown into the triple friendship that would not desert his bones. Then the 3 set the ladder against the tree, and Puglioni went up with his sword in his right hand, and at the top of it he reached up and began to hack at the neck below the iron collar. Presently the bones and the old coat and the soul of Tom fell down with a rattle, and a moment afterwards his head that had watched so long alone swung clear from the swinging chain. These things Will and Joe gathered up, and Puglioni came running down his ladder, and they heaped upon its rungs the terrible remains of their friend, and hastened away wet through the rain, with the fear of phantoms in their hearts and horror lying before them on the ladder. By 2 o'clock they were down again in the valley out of the bitter wind, but they went on past the open grave into the graveyard all among the tombs, with their lantern and their ladder and the terrible thing upon it, which kept their friendship still. Then these three that had robbed the law of its due and proper victim still sinned on for what was still their friend, and levered out the marble slabs from the sacred sepulchre of Paul, the Archbishop of Alois and Vayence, and from it they took the very bones of the Archbishop himself, and carried them away to the eager grave that they had left, and put them in and shovelled back the earth. But all that lay on the ladder they placed with a few tears within the great white sepulchre under the cross of Christ, and put back the marble slabs. Thence the soul of Tom, arising hallowed out of sacred ground, went at dawn down the valley, and, lingering a little about his mother's cottage and old haunts of childhood, passed on and came to the wide lands beyond the clustered homesteads. There met with it all the kindly thoughts that the soul of Tom had ever had, and they flew and sang beside it all the way southwards, until at last, with singing all about it, it came to paradise. But Will and Joe and the gypsy Puglioni went back to their gin, and robbed and cheated again in the tavern of foul repute, and knew not that in their sinful lives they had sinned one sin at which the angels smiled. End of section 5. Recording by Kelvin D., Minneapolis. www.kelvind.com.
Section 6 of The Sword of Welleran and Other Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jairus Amar. The Sword of Welleran and Other Stories by Lord Dunsany. In the twilight. The loch was quite crowded with boats when we capsized. I went down backwards for some few feet before I started to swim. Then I came spluttering upwards towards the light. But instead of reaching the surface, I hit my head against the keel of a boat, and went down again. I struck out almost at once and came up, but before I reached the surface, my head crashed against the boat for the second time, and I went right to the bottom. I was confused and thoroughly frightened. I was desperately in need of air, and knew that if I hit a boat for the third time, I should never see the surface again. Drowning is a horrible death, notwithstanding all that has been said to the contrary. My past life never occurred to my mind, but I thought of many trivial things that I might not do or see again if I were drowned. I swam up in a slanting direction, hoping to avoid the boat that I had struck. Suddenly, I saw all the boats in the loch quite clearly just above me, and every one of their curved varnished planks and the scratches and chips upon their keels. I saw several gaps among the boats where I might have swam up to the surface, but it did not seem worth while to try and get there, and I had forgotten why I wanted to. Then all the people leaned over the sides of their boats. I saw the light flannel suits of the men and the colored flowers of the women's hats, and I noticed details of their dresses quite distinctly. Everybody in the boats was looking down at me. Then they all said to one another, "We must leave him now." And they and the boats went away, and there was nothing above me but the river and the sky, and on either side of me were the green weeds that grew in the mud, for I had somehow sunk back to the bottom again. The river as it flowed by murmured not unpleasantly in my ears, and the rushes seemed to be whispering quite softly among themselves. Presently the murmuring of the river took the form of words, and I heard it say, "We must go on to the sea. We must leave him now." Then the river went away, and both its banks, and the rushes whispered, "Yes, we must leave him now." And they too departed, and I was left in a great emptiness staring up at the blue sky. Then the great sky bent over me, and spoke quite softly like a kindly nurse soothing some little foolish child. And the sky said, "Goodbye. All will be well. Goodbye." And I was sorry to lose the blue sky, but the sky went away. Then I was alone, with nothing round about me. I could see no light, but it was not dark. There was just absolutely nothing, above me and below me and on every side. I thought that perhaps I was dead, and that this might be eternity, when suddenly some great southern hills rose up all round about me, and I was lying on the warm grassy slope in a valley in England. It was a valley that I had known well when I was young, but I had not seen it now for many years. Beside me stood the tall flower of the mint. I saw the sweet-smelling thyme flower, and 1 or 2 wild strawberries. There came up to me from fields below me the beautiful smell of hay, and there was a break in the voice of the cuckoo. There was a feeling of summer and of evening and of lateness and of Sabbath in the air. The sky was calm and full of a strange colour, and the sun was low. The bells in the church in the village were all a ring, and the chimes went wandering with echoes up the valley towards the sun. And whenever the echoes died, a new chime was born. And all the people of the village walked up a stone-paved path under a black oak porch and went into the church. And the chime stopped, and the people of the village began to sing. And the level sunlight shone on the white tombstones that stood all round the church. Then there was a stillness in the village, and shouts and laughter came up from the valley no more. Only the occasional sound of the organ and of song. And the blue butterflies, those that loved the chalk, came and perched themselves on the tall grasses, 5 or 6 sometimes on a single piece of grass, and they closed their wings and slept, and the grass bent a little beneath them. And from the woods along the tops of the hills the rabbits came hopping out and nibbled the grass, and hopped a little further and nibbled again, and the large daisies closed their petals up, and the birds began to sing. Then the hills spoke, all the great chalk hills that I loved, and with a deep and solemn voice they said, "We have come to you to say good-bye." And there was nothing again all round about me upon every side. I looked everywhere for something on which to rest the eye. Nothing. Suddenly a low grey sky swept over me, and a moist air met my face. A great plain rushed up to me from the edge of the clouds. On 2 sides it touched the sky, and on 2 sides between it and the clouds a line of low hills lay. One line of hills brooded grey in the distance. The other stood a patchwork of little square green fields, with a few white cottages about it. The plain was an archipelago of 1,000,000 islands, each about a yard square or less, and every one of them was red with heather. I was back on the bog of Allen again after many years, and it was just the same as ever, though I had heard that they were draining it. I was with an old friend whom I was glad to see again, for they had told me that he died some years ago. He seemed strangely young, but what surprised me most was that he stood upon a piece of bright green moss which I had always learned to think would never bear. I was glad, too, to see the old bog again, and all the lovely things that grew there, the scarlet mosses and the green mosses and the firm and friendly heather, and the deep silent water. I saw a little stream that wandered vaguely through the bog, and little white shells down in the clear depths of it. I saw, a little way off, one of the great pools where no islands are, with rushes round its borders, where the duck loved to come. I looked long at the untroubled world of heather, and then I looked at the white cottages on the hill, and saw the grey smoke curling from their chimneys, and knew that they had burned turf there, and longed for the smell of burning turf again. And far away, there arose and came nearer a weird cry of wild and happy voices, and a flock of geese appeared that was coming from the northward. Then their cries blended into one great voice of exultation, the voice of freedom, the voice of Ireland, the voice of the waste. And the voice said, "Goodbye to you, goodbye," and passed away into the distance. And as it passed, the tame geese on the farms cried out to their brothers up above them that they were free. Then the hills went away, and the bog and the sky went with them, and I was alone again, as lost souls are alone. Then there grew up beside me the red brick buildings of my first school and the chapel that adjoined it. The fields a little way off were full of boys in white flannels playing cricket. On the asphalt playing ground, just by the schoolroom windows, stood Agamemnon, Achilles, and Odysseus, with their Argives army behind them. But Hector stepped down out of a ground floor window, and in the schoolroom were all Priam's sons, and the Archeans and fair Helen. And a little farther away the 10,000 drifted across the playground, going up into the heart of Persia to place Cyrus on his brother's throne. And the boys that I knew called to me from the fields and said, "Goodbye." And they and the fields went away. And the 10,000 said, "Goodbye," each file as they passed me marching swiftly. And they too disappeared. And Hector and Agamemnon said goodbye, and the host of the Argives and of the Archeans. And they all went away, and the old school with them, and I was alone again. The next scene that filled the emptiness was rather dim. I was being led by my nurse along a little footpath over a common in Surrey. She was quite young. Close by, a band of gypsies had lit their fire. Near them their romantic caravan stood unhorsed, and the horse cropped grass beside it. It was evening, and the gypsies muttered round their fire in a tongue unknown and strange. Then they all said in English, "Goodbye," and the evening and the common and the campfire went away. And instead of this, a white highway with darkness and stars below it that led into darkness and stars, but at the near end of the road were common fields and gardens. And there I stood close to a large number of people, men and women. And I saw a man walking alone down the road away from me, towards the darkness and the stars, and all the people called him by his name, and the man would not hear them, but walked on down the road, and the people went on calling him by his name. But I became irritated with the man, because he would not stop or turn around when so many people called him by his name, and it was a very strange name. And I became wary of hearing the strange name so often repeated, so that I made a great effort to call him, that he might listen, and that the people might stop repeating this strange name. And with the effort I opened my eyes wide, and the name that the people called was my own name, and I lay on the river's bank, with men and women bending over me, and my hair was wet. End of section 6. Recording by Jairus Amar.
Section 7 of The Sword of Welleran and Other Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Steve Vito, www.stevevito.com. The Sword of Welleran and Other Stories by Lord Dunsany. The Ghosts. The argument that I had with my brother in his great lonely house will scarcely interest my readers. Not those at least whom I hope may be attracted by the experiment that I undertook, and by the strange things that befell me in that hazardous region into which so lightly and so ignorantly I allowed my fancy to enter. It was at Onele that I had visited him. Now Onele stands in a wide isolation, in the midst of a dark gathering of old whispering cedars. They nod their heads together when the north wind comes, and nod again and agree, and furtively grow still again, and say no more a while. The north wind is to them like a nice problem among wise old men. They nod their heads over it, and mutter about it all together. They know much, those cedars. They have been there so long. Their grandsires knew Lebanon, and the grandsires of these were the servants of the king of Tyre, and came to Solomon's court. And amidst these black-haired children of gray-headed time stood the old house of Onele. I know not how many centuries had lashed against it their evanescent foam of years, but it was still unshattered, and all about it were the things of long ago, as cling strange growths to some sea-defying rock. Here, like the shells of long-dead limpets, was armor that men encased themselves in long ago. Here, too, were tapestries of many colors, beautiful as seaweed. No modern flotsam ever drifted hither, no early Victorian furniture, no electric light. The great trade routes that littered the years with empty meat tins and cheap novels were far from here. Well, the centuries will shatter it and drive its fragments onto distant shores. Meanwhile, while it yet stood, I went on a visit there to my brother, and we argued about ghosts. My brother's intelligence on this subject seemed to me to be in need of correction. He mistook things imagined for things having an actual existence. He argued that second-hand evidence of persons having seen ghosts proved ghosts to exist. I said that even if they had seen ghosts, this was no proof at all. Nobody believes that there are red rats, though there is plenty of first-hand evidence of men having seen them in delirium. Finally, I said I would see ghosts myself and continue to argue against their actual existence. So I collected a handful of cigars and drank several cups of very strong tea, and went without my dinner and retired into a room where there was a dark oak and all the chairs were covered with tapestry. And my brother went to bed bored with our argument and trying hard to dissuade me from making myself uncomfortable. All the way up the old stairs as I stood at the bottom of them, and as his candle went winding up and up, I heard him still trying to persuade me to have supper and go to bed. It was a windy winter, and outside the cedars were muttering I know not what about, but I think that they were Tories of a school long dead, and were troubled about something new. Within, a great damp log upon the fireplace began to squeak and sing, and struck up a whining tune, and a tall flame stood up over it and beat time, and all the shadows crowded round and round and began to dance. In distant corners, old masses of darkness sat like chaperones and never moved. Over there, in the darkest part of the room, stood a door that was always locked. It led into the hall, but no one ever used it. Near that door something had happened once, of which the family are not proud. We do not speak of it. There in the firelight stood the venerable forms of the old chairs. The hands that have made their tapestries lay far beneath the soil. The needles with which they wrought were many separate flakes of rust. No one wove now in that old room. No one but the assiduous ancient spiders who, watching by the deathbed of things of yore, worked shrouds to hold their dust. In shrouds about the cornices already lay the heart of the oak wainscot that the worm had eaten out. Surely at such an hour, in such a room, a fancy already excited by hunger and strong tea might see the ghosts of former occupants. I expected nothing less. The fire flickered and the shadows danced. Memories of strange historic things rose vividly in my mind. But midnight chimed solemnly from a 7-foot clock, and nothing happened. My imagination would not be hurried, and the chill that is with the small hours had come upon me, and I had nearly abandoned myself to sleep, when in the hall adjoining there arose a rustling of silk dresses that I had waited for and expected. Then there entered 2 by 2 the high-born ladies and their gallants of Jacobean times. They were little more than shadows, very dignified shadows, and almost indistinct. But you have read all the ghost stories before. You have all seen in museums the dresses of those times. There is little need to describe them. They entered, several of them, and sat down on the old chairs, perhaps a little carelessly considering the value of the tapestries. Then the rustling of their dresses ceased. Well, I had seen ghosts, and was neither frightened nor convinced that ghosts existed. I was about to get up out of my chair and go to bed, when there came a sound of pattering in the hall, a sound of bare feet coming over the polished floor, and every now and then a foot would slip and I heard claws scratching along the wood as some four-footed thing lost and regained its balance. I was not frightened, but uneasy. The pattering came straight towards the room that I was in. Then I heard the sniffing of expectant nostrils. Perhaps uneasy was not the most suitable word to describe my feelings then. Suddenly, a herd of black creatures larger than bloodhounds came galloping in. They had large, pendulous ears. Their noses were to the ground, sniffing. They went up to the lords and ladies of long ago and fawned about them disgustingly. Their eyes were horribly bright and ran down to great depths. When I looked into them, I knew suddenly what these creatures were, and I was afraid. They were the sins, the filthy, immoral sins of these courtly men and women. How demure she was, the lady that sat near me on an old-world chair. How demure she was, and how fair. To have beside her with its jowl, upon her lap, a sin with such cavernous red eyes. A clear case of murder. And you, yonder lady, with the golden hair, surely not you. And yet that fearful beast with the yellow eyes slinks from you to yonder courtier there, and whenever one drives it away, it slinks back to the other. Over there, a lady tries to smile as she strokes the loathsome furry head of another's sin, but one of her own is jealous and intrudes itself under her hand. Here sits an old nobleman with his grandson on his knee, and one of the great black sins of the grandfather is licking the child's face, and has made the child its own. Sometimes a ghost would move and seek another chair, but always his pack of sins would move behind him. Poor ghosts. Poor ghosts. How many flights they must have attempted for 200 years from their hated sins. How many excuses they must have given for their presence, and the sins were with them still, and still unexplained. Suddenly, one of them seemed to scent my living blood, and bayed horribly, and all the others left their ghosts at once and dashed up to the sin that had given tongue. The brute had picked up my scent near the door by which I had entered, and they moved slowly nearer to me, sniffing along the floor, and uttering every now and then their fearful cry. I saw the whole thing had gone too far, but now they had seen me, now they were all about me. They sprang up trying to reach my throat, and whenever their claws touched me, horrible thoughts came into my mind, and unutterable desires dominated my heart. I planned bestial things as these creatures leaped around me, and planned them with a masterly cunning. A great red-eyed murder was among the foremost of those furry things, from whom I feebly strove to defend my throat. Suddenly, it seemed to me good that I should kill my brother. It seemed important to me that I should not risk being punished. I knew where a revolver was kept. After I shot him, I would dress the body up and put flour on the face like a man that had been acting as a ghost. It would be very simple. I would say that he had frightened me, and the servants had heard us talking about ghosts. There were one or two trivialities that would have to be arranged, but nothing escaped my mind. Yes, it seemed very good to me that I should kill my brother as I looked into the red depths of the creature's eyes. But one last effort as they dragged me down. If two straight lines cut one another, I said, the opposite angles are equal. Let AB, CD cut one another at E. Then the angles CEA, CEB equal two right angles. Prop 8. Also, CEA, AED equal two right angles. I moved towards the door to get the revolver. A hideous exultation arose among the beasts. But the angle CEA is common. Therefore, AED equals CEB. In the same way, CEA equals DEB, QED. It was proved. Logic and reason reestablished themselves in my mind. There were no dark hounds of sin. The tapestried chairs were empty. It seemed to me an inconceivable thought that a man should murder his brother. End of section 7. This has been read by Steve Vito. www.stevevito.com.
Section 8 of The Sword of Welleran and Other Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Asaf Kos. The Sword of Welleran and Other Stories by Lord DUNSANY. The Whirlpool. Once going down to the shore of the great sea, I came upon the Whirlpool, lying prone upon the sand, and stretching his huge limbs in the sun. I said to him, "Who art thou?" And he said, "I am named Nuzwana, the whelmer of ships, and from the straits of Pondar Obed I am come, wherein it is my wont to vex the seas. There I chased Leviathan with my hands when he was young and strong. Often he slipped through my fingers and away into the weed forests that grow below the storms in the dusk on the floor of the sea. But at last I caught and tamed him. For there I lurk upon the ocean's floor, midway between the knees of either cliff, to guard the passage of the straits from all the ships that seek the further seas. And whenever the white sails of the tall ships come swelling round the corner of the crag out of the sunlit spaces of the known sea, and into the dark of the straits, then standing firm upon the ocean's floor, with my knees a little bent, I take the waters of the straits in both my hands, and whirl them round my head. But the ship comes gliding on with the sound of the sailors singing on her decks, all singing songs of the islands, and carrying the rumor of their cities to the lonely seas, till they see me suddenly astride, athwart their course, and are caught in the waters as I whirl them round my head. Then I draw in the waters of the straits towards me and downwards, nearer and nearer to my terrible feet, and hear in my ears, above the roar of my waters, the ultimate cry of the ship. For just before I drag them to the floor of ocean, and stamp them asunder with my wrecking feet, ships utter their ultimate cry, and with it go the lives of all the sailors and passes the soul of the ship. And in the ultimate cry of ships are the songs the sailors sing, and their hopes and all their loves, and the song of the wind among the masts and timbers when they stood in the forest long ago, and the whisper of the rain that made them grow, and the soul of the tall pine tree or the oak. All this a ship gives up in one cry, which she makes at the last, and at that moment I would pity the tall ship if I might. But a man may feel pity who sits in comfort by his fireside, telling tales in the winter. No pity are they permitted ever to feel, who do the work of the gods. And so, when I have brought her circling from round my shoulders to my waist, and thence, with her masts all sloping inwards to my knees, and lower still and downward still, her topmast pennants flutter against my ankles. Then I, Nuzwana, whelmer of ships, lift up my feet and trample her beams asunder, and there go up again to the surface of the straits only a few broken timbers and the memories of the sailors and of their early loves to drift forever down the empty seas. Once in every 100 years, for one day only, I go to rest myself along the shore, and to sun my limbs on the sand, that the tall ships may go through the unguarded straits and find the Happy Isles. And the Happy Isles stand midmost among the smiles of the sunny further seas. And there the sailors may come upon content and long for nothing. Or if they long for aught, they shall possess it. There comes not time with his devouring hours, nor any of the evils of the gods or man. These are the islands whereto the souls of the sailors every night put in from all the world to rest from going up and down the seas, to behold again the vision of far-off intimate hills that lift their orchards high above the fields facing the sunlight, and for a while again to speak with the souls of old. But about the dawn dreams twitter and arise, and circling thrice around the Happy Isles set out again to find the world of man, then follow the souls of the sailors, as, at evening, with slow stroke of stately wings, the heron follows behind the flight of multitudinous rooks. But the souls returning find awakening bodies, and endure the toil of the day. Such are the Happy Isles, whereunto few have come, save but as roaming shadows in the night, and for only a little while. But longer than is needed to make me strong and fierce again, I may not stay, and at set of sun, when my arms are strong again, and when I feel in my legs that I can plant them fair and bent upon the floor of ocean, then I go back to take a new grip upon the waters of the straits, and to guard the further seas again for 100 years, because the gods are jealous lest too many men shall pass to the Happy Isles and find content, for the gods have not content. End of section 8.
Section 9 of The Sword of Welleran and Other Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This section has been read by Roslyn Carlyle. The Sword of Welleran and Other Stories by Lord Dunsany. The Hurricane. One night I sat alone on the great down, looking over the edge of it at a murky, sullen city. All day long, with its smoke, it had troubled the holy sky, and now it sat there, roaring in the distance, and glared at me with its furnaces and lighted factory windows. Suddenly I became aware that I was not the only enemy of that city, for I perceived the colossal form of the hurricane, walking over the down towards me, playing idly with the flowers as he passed, and near me he stopped and spake to the earthquake, who had come up, mole-like but vast, out of a cleft in the earth. "Old friend," said the hurricane, "rememberest when we wrecked the nations and drave the herds of the sea into new pasturage?" "Yes," said the Earthquake drowsily. Yes, yes. Old friend, said the Hurricane, there are cities everywhere. Over thy head while thou didst sleep, they have built them constantly. My four children, the winds, suffocate with the fumes of them. The valleys are desolate of flowers, and the lovely forests are cut down since last we went abroad together. The Earthquake lay there with his snout towards the city, blinking at the lights, while the tall Hurricane stood beside him, pointing fiercely at it. Come, said the Hurricane, let us fare forth again and destroy them, that all the lovely forests may come back, and the furry creeping things. Thou shalt whelm these cities utterly, and drive the people forth, and I will smite them in the shelterless places, and sweep their desecrations from the sea. Wilt thou come forth with me, and do this thing for the glory of it? Wilt thou wreck the world again as we did, thou and I, or ever man had come? Wilt thou come forth to this place at this hour tomorrow night? Yes, said the Earthquake, yes. And he crept to his cleft again, and head foremost waddled down into the abysses. When the Hurricane strode away, I got up quietly and departed. But at that hour of the next night I came up cautiously to the same spot. There I found the huge grey form of the Hurricane alone, with his head bowed in his hands, weeping, for the Earthquake sleeps long and heavily in the abysses, and he would not wake. End of section 9.
Section 11 of The Sword of Welleran and Other Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ed Humple. The Sword of Welleran and Other Stories by Lord Dunsany. Section 11. The Lord of Cities. I came one day upon a road that wandered so aimlessly that it was suited to my mood, so I followed it, and it led me presently among deep woods. Somewhere in the midst of them Autumn held his court, sitting wreathed with gorgeous garlands, and it was the day before his annual festival of the Dance of Leaves, the courtly festival upon which hungry winter rushes mob-like, and there arise the furious cries of the north wind triumphing, and the splendour and grace of the woods is gone, and autumn flees away, discrowned and forgotten, and never again returns. Other autumns arise, other autumns, and fall before other winters. A road led away to the left, but my road went straight on. The road to the left had a trodden appearance. There were wheel tracks on it, and it seemed the correct way to take. It looked as if no one could have any business with the road that led straight on and up the hill. Therefore I went straight on and up the hill, and here and there on the road grew blades of grass undisturbed in the repose and hush that the road had earned from going up and down the world. For you can go by this road, as you can go by all roads, to London, to Lincoln, to the north of Scotland, to the west of Wales, and to Wrellisford, where roads end. Presently the woods ended, and I came to the open fields, and at the same moment to the top of the hill, and saw the high places of Somerset and the downs of Wilts spread out along the horizon. Suddenly I saw underneath me the village of Wrellisford, with no sound in its street but the voice of the Wrellis roaring as he tumbled over a weir above the village. So I followed my road down over the crest of the hill, and the road became more languid as I descended, and less concerned with the cares of a highway. Here a spring broke out in the middle of it, and here another. The road never heeded. A stream ran right across it, still it straggled on. Suddenly it gave up the minimum property that a road should possess, and, renouncing its connection with high streets, its lineage of Piccadilly, shrank to one side and became an unpretentious footpath. Then it led me to the old bridge over the stream, and thus I came to Wrellisford, and found, after travelling in many lands, a village with no wheel tracks in its street. On the other side of the bridge, my friend the road struggled a few yards up the grassy slope, and there ceased. Over all the village hung a great stillness, with the roar of the Wrellis cutting right across it, and there came occasionally the bark of a dog that kept watch over the broken stillness, and over the sanctity of that untravelled road. That terrible and wasting fever that, unlike so many plagues, comes not from the east but from the west, the fever of hurry, had not come here. Only the Wrellis hurried on his eternal quest, but it was a calm and placid hurry that gave one time for song. It was in the early afternoon, and nobody was about. Either they worked beyond the mysterious valley that nursed Wrellisford and hid it from the world, or else they secluded themselves within their old-time houses that were roofed with tiles of stone. I sat down upon the old stone bridge and watched the Wrellis, who seemed to me to be the only traveller that came from far away into this village where roads end, and passed on beyond it. And yet the Wrellis comes singing out of eternity, and tarries for very little while in the village where roads end, and passes on into eternity again, and so surely do all that dwell in Wrellisford. I wondered, as I leaned upon the bridge, in what place the Wrellis would first find the sea, whether as he wound idly through meadows on his long quest he would suddenly behold him, and, leaping down over some rocky cliff, take to him at once the message of the hills, or whether, widening slowly into some grand and tidal estuary, he would take his waste of waters to the sea, and the might of the river should meet with the might of the waves, like two emperors clad in gleaming mail meeting midway between two hosts of war, and the little Wrellis would become a haven for returning ships, and a setting out place for adventurous men. A little beyond the bridge there stood an old mill with a ruined roof, and a small branch of the Wrellis rushed through its emptiness, shouting, like a boy playing alone in a corridor of some desolate house. The mill wheel was gone, but there lay there still great bars and wheels and cogs, the bones of some dead industry. I know not what industry was once lord in that house. I know not what retinue of workers mourns him now. I only know who is lord there today in all those empty chambers. For as soon as I entered, I saw a whole wall draped with his marvellous black tapestry, without price, because inimitable and too delicate to pass from hand to hand among merchants. I looked at the wonderful complexity of its infinite threads. My finger sank into it for more than an inch without feeling the touch. So black it was, and so carefully wrought, sombrely covering the whole of the wall, that it might have been worked to commemorate the deaths of all that ever lived there, as indeed it was. I looked through a hole in the wall into the inner chamber, where a worn-out driving band went among many wheels, and there this priceless, inimitable stuff not merely clothed the walls, but hung from bars and ceilings in beautiful draperies, in marvellous festoons. Nothing was ugly in this desolate house, for the busy artist's soul of its present lord had beautified everything in its desolation. It was the unmistakable work of the spider, in whose house I was, and the house was utterly desolate but for him, and silent but for the roar of the Wrellis and the shout of the little stream. Then I turned homewards, and as I went up and over the hill and lost sight of the village, I saw the road whiten and harden, and gradually broaden out till the tracks of wheels appeared, and it went afar to take the young man of Wrellisford into the wide ways of the earth, to the new west and the mysterious east, and into the troubled south. And that night, when the house was still and sleep was far off, hushing hamlets and giving ease to cities, my fancies wandered up that aimless road and came suddenly to Wrellisford. And it seemed to me that the travelling of so many people for so many years between Wrellisford and John O'Groats, talking to one another as they went, or muttering alone, had given the road a voice. And it seemed to me that night that the road spoke to the river by Wrellisford Bridge, speaking with the voice of many pilgrims. And the road said to the river, I rest here. How is it with you? And the river, who is always speaking, said, I rest nowhere from doing the work of the world. I carry the murmur of inner lands to the sea, and to the abysses voices of the hills. It is I, said the road, that do the work of the world, and take from city to city the rumour of each. There is nothing higher than man in the making of cities. What do you do for man? And the river said, Beauty and song are higher than man. I carry the news seaward of the first song of the thrush after the furious retreat of winter northward, and the first timid anemone learns from me that she is safe and that spring has truly come. Oh, but the song of all the birds in spring is more beautiful than man, and the first coming of the hyacinth more delectable than his face. When spring is fallen upon the days of summer, I carry away with mournful joy at night, petal by petal, the rhododendron's bloom. No lit procession of purple kings is nigh so fair as that. No beautiful death of well-beloved men hath such a glory of forlornness. And I bear away the pink and white petals of the apple blossom's youth, when the laborious time comes for his work in the world, and for the bearing of apples. And I am robed each day and every night anew with the beauty of heaven, and I make lovely visions of the trees. But man, what is man? In the ancient parliament of the elder hills, when the grey ones speak together, they say naught of man, but concern themselves only with their brethren the stars. Or when they wrap themselves in purple cloaks at evening, they lament some old irreparable wrong, or, uttering some mountain hymn, all mourn the set of sun. Your beauty, said the road, and the beauty of the sky, and of the rhododendron blossoms and of spring, live only in the mind of man, and except in the mind of man the mountains have no voices. Nothing is beautiful that has not been seen by man's eye, and if your rhododendron blossom was beautiful for a moment, it soon withered and was drowned, and spring soon passes away. Beauty can only live on in the mind of man. I bring thought into the mind of man swiftly from distant places every day. I know the telegraph. I know him well. He and I have walked for hundreds of miles together. There is no work in the world except for man and the making of his cities. I take wares to and fro from city to city. My little stream in the field there, said the river, used to make wares in that house for a while. Once. Ah, said the road, I remember, but I brought cheaper ones from distant cities. Nothing is of any importance but making cities for man. I know so little about him, said the river, but I have a great deal of work to do. I have all this water to send down to the sea, and then tomorrow or next day all the leaves of autumn will be coming this way. It will be very beautiful. The sea is a very, very wonderful place. I know all about it. I have heard shepherd boys singing of it, and sometimes before a storm the gulls come up. It is a place all blue and shining and full of pearls, and has in it coral islands and isles of spice, and storms and galleons and the bones of drake. The sea is much greater than man. When I come to the sea, he will know that I have worked well for him. But I must hurry, for I have much to do. This bridge delays me a little. Some day I will carry it away. Oh, you must not do that, said the road. Oh, not for a long time, said the river. Some centuries, perhaps. And I have much to do besides. There is my song to sing, for instance, and that alone is more beautiful than any noise that man makes. All work is for man, said the road, and for the building of cities. There is no beauty or romance or mystery in the sea, except for the men that sail abroad upon it, and for those that stay at home and dream of them. As for your song, it rings night and morning, year in, year out, in the ears of men that are born in Wrellisford. At night it is part of their dreams, at morning it is the voice of day, and so it becomes part of their souls. But the song is not beautiful in itself. I take these men with your song in their souls up over the edge of the valley and a long way off beyond, and I am a strong and dusty road up there, and they go with your song in their souls and turn it into music and gladden cities. But nothing is the work of the world except work for man. I wish I was quite sure about the work of the world, said the stream. I wish I knew for certain for whom we work. I feel almost sure that it is for the sea. He is very great and beautiful. I think that there can be no greater master than the sea. I think that some day he may be so full of romance and mystery and sound of sheep bells and murmur of mist-hidden hills, which we streams have brought him, that there will be no more music or beauty left in the world, and all the world will end. And perhaps the streams shall gather at the last, we all together, to the sea. Or perhaps the sea will give us at the last each one his own again, giving back all that he has garnered in the years, the little petals of the apple blossom, and the mourned ones of the rhododendron, and our old visions of the trees and sky. So many memories have left the hills, but who may say? For who knows the tides of the sea? Be sure that it is all for man, said the road, for man and the making of cities. Something had come near, on utterly silent feet. Peace, peace, it said, you disturb the queenly night, who, having come into this valley, is a guest in my dark halls. Let us have an end to this discussion. It was the spider who spoke. The work of the world is the making of cities and palaces, but it is not for man. What is man? He only prepares my cities for me and mellows them. All his works are ugly, his richest tapestries are coarse and clumsy. He is a noisy idler. He only protects me from mine enemy the wind, and the beautiful work in my cities, the curving outlines and the delicate weavings, is all mine. 10 years to 100 it takes to build a city. For 500 or 600 more it mellows and is prepared for me. Then I inhabit it, and hide away all that is ugly, and draw beautiful lines about it to and fro. There is nothing so beautiful as cities and palaces. They are the loveliest places in the world, because they are the stillest, and so most like the stars. They are noisy at first, for a little, before I come to them. They have ugly corners not yet rounded off, and coarse tapestries, and when they become ready for me and my exquisite work, they are quite silent and beautiful. And there I entertain the regal knights, when they come there jewelled with stars, and all their train of silence, and regale them with costly dust. Already nods, in a city that I wot of, a lonely sentinel whose lords are dead, who grows too old and sleepy to drive away the gathering silence that infests the streets. Tomorrow I go to see if he be still at his post. For me Babylon was built, and rocky Tyre, and still men build my cities. All the work of the world is the making of cities, and all of them I inherit. End of section 11. The Lord of Cities.
Section 12 of The Sword of Welleran and Other Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Sandra. The Sword of Welleran and Other Stories by Lord DUNSANY. Section 12. The Doom of La Traviata. Evening stole up out of mysterious lands and came down on the streets of Paris, and the things of the day withdrew themselves and hid away, and the beautiful city was strangely altered, and with it the hearts of men. And with lights and music and in silence and in the dark, the other life arose, the life that knows the night. And dark cats crept from the houses and moved to silent places, and dim streets became haunted with dusk shapes. At this hour, in a mean house near to the Moulin Rouge, La Traviata died, and her death was brought to her by her own sins and not by the years of God. But the soul of La Traviata drifted blindly about the streets where she had sinned, till it struck against the wall of Notre Dame de Paris. Thence it rushed upwards, as the sea mist when it beats against a cliff, and streamed away to Paradise, and was there judged. And it seemed to me, as I watched from my place of dreaming, when La Traviata came and stood before the seat of judgment, that clouds came rushing up from the far paradisal hills, and gathered together over the head of God, and became one black cloud, and the clouds moved swiftly as shadows of the night when a lantern is swung in the hand, and more clouds rushed up, and ever more and more, and, as they gathered, the cloud a little above the head of God became no larger, but only grew blacker and blacker, and the halos of the saints settled lower upon their heads, and narrowed and became pale, and the singing of the choirs of the seraphim faltered and sunk low, and the converse of the blessed suddenly ceased. Then a stern look came into the face of God, so that the seraphim turned away and left him and the saints. Then God commanded, and 7 great angels rose up slowly through the clouds that carpet Paradise, and there was pity on their faces, and their eyes were closed. Then God pronounced judgment, and the lights of Paradise went out, and the azure crystal windows that looked toward the world, and the windows rouge and vert became dark and colourless, and I saw no more. Presently the 7 great angels came out by one of heaven's gates, and set their faces hellwards, and 4 of them carried the young soul of La Traviata, and one of them went on before, and one of them followed behind. These 6 trod with mighty strides the long and dusty road that is named the Way of the Damned. But the 7th flew above them all the way, and the lights of the fires of hell that was hidden from the 6 by the dust of that dreadful road flared on the feathers of his breast. Presently the 7 angels, as they swept hellwards, uttered speech. "She is very young," they said, "and she is very beautiful," they said, and they looked long at the soul of La Traviata, looking not at the stains of sin, but at that portion of her soul wherewith she had loved her sister a long while dead, who flitted now about an orchard on one of heaven's hills, with a low sunlight ever on her face, who communed daily with the saints when they passed that way, going to bless the dead from heaven's utmost edge. And as they looked long at the beauty of all that remained beautiful in her soul, they said, "It is but a young soul." And they would have taken her to one of heaven's hills, and would there have given her a cymbal and a dulcimer, but they knew that the paradisal gates were clamped and barred against La Traviata. And they would have taken her to a valley in the world where there were a great many flowers, and a loud sound of streams, where birds were singing always, and church bells rang on Sabbaths. Only this they durst not do. So they swept onwards nearer and nearer hell. But when they were come quite close, and the glare was on their faces, and they saw the gates already divide and prepare to open outwards, they said, "Hell is a terrible city, and she is tired of cities." Then suddenly they dropped her by the side of the road, and wheeled and flew away. But into a great pink flower that was horrible and lovely grew the soul of La Traviata, and it had in it 2 eyes but no eyelids, and it stared constantly into the faces of all the passers-by that went along the dusty road to hell, and the flower grew in the glare of the lights of hell, and withered but could not die, only one petal turned back toward the heavenly hills, as an ivy leaf turns outwards to the day, and in the soft and silvery light of paradise it withered not nor faded, but heard at times the commune of the saints coming murmuring from the distance, and sometimes caught the scent of orchards wafted from the heavenly hills, and felt a faint breeze cool it every evening at the hour when the saints to heaven's edge went forth to bless the dead. But the Lord arose with his sword and scattered his disobedient angels as a thresher scatters chaff. End of section 12.
Section 13 of The Sword of Welleran and Other Stories. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This section has been read by Rosalind Carlyle. The Sword of Welleran and Other Stories by Lord Dunsany. On the Dry Land. Over the marshes hung the gorgeous night with all his wandering bands of nomad stars, and his whole host of still ones blinked and watched. Over the safe dry land to the eastward, grey and cold, the first clear pallor of dawn was coming up above the heads of the immortal gods. Then, as they neared at last the safety of the dry land, Love looked at the man whom he had led for so long through the marshes, and saw that his hair was white, for it was shining in the pallor of the dawn. Then they stepped together on to the land, and the old man sat down weary on the grass, for they had wandered in the marshes for many years, and the light of the grey dawn widened above the heads of the gods. And Love said to the old man, "I will leave you now." And the old man made no answer, but wept softly. Then Love was grieved in his little careless heart, and he said, "You must not be sorry that I go, nor yet regret me, nor care for me at all. I am a very foolish child, and was never kind to you, nor friendly. I never cared for your great thoughts, or for what was good in you, but perplexed you by leading you up and down the perilous marshes, and I was so heartless that, had you perished where I led you, it would have been naught to me. And I only stayed with you because you were good to play with, and I am cruel and altogether worthless, and not such a one as any should be sorry for when I go, or one to be regretted or even cared for at all." And still the old man spoke not, but wept softly, and Love grieved bitterly in his kindly heart. And Love said, "Because I am so small, my strength has been concealed from you in the evil that I have done. But my strength is great, and I have used it unjustly. Often I pushed you from the causeway through the marshes, and cared not if you drowned. Often I mocked you, and caused others to mock you, and often I led you among those that hated me, and laughed when they revenged themselves upon you. So weep not, for there is no kindness in my heart, but only murder and foolishness, and I am no companion for one so wise as you. But I am so frivolous and silly that I laughed at your noble dreams and hindered all of your deeds. See, now you have found me out, and now you will send me away, and here you will live at ease and undisturbed, have noble dreams of the immortal gods. See now, here is dawn and safety, and there is darkness and peril. Still the old man wept softly. Then Love said, "Is it thus with you?" And his voice was grave now and quiet. "Are you so troubled, old friend of so many years? There is grief in my heart for you. Old friend of perilous ventures, I must leave you now, but I will send my brother soon to you, my little brother Death, and he will come up out of the marshes to you, and will not forsake you, but will be true to you as I have not been true." And dawn grew brighter over the immortal gods, and the old man smiled through his tears, which glistened wondrously in the increasing light. But Love went down to the night and to the marshes, looking backward over his shoulder as he went, and smiling beautifully about his eyes. And in the marshes whereunto he went, in the midst of the gorgeous night, and under the wandering bands of nomad stars, rose shouts of laughter and the sounds of the dance. And after a while, with his face towards the morning, Death out of the marshes came up tall and beautiful, and with a faint smile shadowy on his lips, and lifted in his arms the lonely man, being gentle with him, and, murmuring with his low deep voice an ancient song, carried him to the morning, to the gods. End of Section 13. End of The Sword of Welleran and Other Stories by Lord Dunsany.